actually, I think as well, it's a very interesting way of finding out about places is going visiting graves. You never know quite what you'll find. Sometimes it isn't where you expect, or you might see the grave next to a grave, or things on the grave that give you indications. It's a bit like archaeology, finding out little bits about what is going on. So it can be a really useful way to find out about someone's life.
The electric cinema stand up. From the electric cinema. Hi everyone. So this is our first stop here. And forgive me if I'm reading a little bit from the script, but because I'm borrowing some of Richard's research, I've not necessarily got it off the bat, but this is the gravestone for Sir Gilbert Barling, so one of the Royal College of Surgeons, and a great contributor to Birmingham society. So I don't know if anybody knows this name, Leicester Collingwood, but Leicester Collingwood, it was the stage name of Edward Henry Parker, and Leicester Collingwood was he became the owner of the Alexandra Theatre and director of it, and he had started actually life as a kind of commercial traveller. So this is the Quaker section of the cemetery. So we've got Cadburys, we've got Lloyds, we've got Clarks. There's all kinds of people buried here from who were Quaker. And it's interesting that there is that section. So we've just focused on just 2 or 3 of them, so I'll tell you a little bit about each of the ones we have. So this one over here, Charles Alexander, in fact he married a Cadbury, he married Helen. He was born in East Tennessee on the 24th of October 1867, and he became a popular 19th century gospel singer who worked on the evangelist circuit for many years. So Alexander's early Christian influence came from his mother, who was in the habit of reading Dwight L. Moody sermons to the family every night around the fireplace. So this is 1905. This is Alexander singing. I won't play Charles Alexander singing.
Oh.
I do like the kind of vinyl atmosphere.
Yes. Yes.
I've gone slightly the wrong way here.
No, that's all right. Yeah, you have. People coming this way. She's just down here, Bertha.
Yeah.
There's maybe sunken graves around here. There is in sort of Key Hill and whatever.
Oh, they not really. Oh, that's interesting. That must be down to do with work with.
Be really careful where you work.
Really took a bit of finding, but it was very exciting for us to find this grave because somebody was saying, well, actually, is there a plan? And there is a plan. And I was talking to somebody earlier, I think it was about Find My Grave, and we were hunting for this grave. And this is the grave of somebody called Bertha Ryland. And Bertha Ryland was an active militant suffragette in the city of Birmingham. And our organised People's Heritage Corp has done quite a lot of work on the history of suffrage and protest in the city. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of it, but Birmingham was actually a very prominent active city in terms of suffrage and suffrage activism and in suffragettes. So we tend to hear quite a lot about Manchester, quite a lot about London, and a bit less about Birmingham, and actually a lot happens in Birmingham. So right from the 1860s onwards, the Birmingham Women's Suffrage Society were campaigning for women to have the right to vote, and that was the constitutional side, and then beyond that there was the militant suffragette side, which happened a bit later. Bertha Ryland was part of a quite prominent Edgbaston family. Both she and her mother were involved in suffrage and suffrage society for women, and then went on to become involved in suffragettes and suffragette activism. And Bertha is particularly notable because she was the person who committed one of the last acts of militant suffragette activism in the city, and that was in 1914 when she walked into Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery with a meat cleaver popped up, hidden up her sleeve, and she slashed a painting, Master Thornhill by Romney, 3 times, and was promptly arrested, as you would imagine. And the Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery was then closed for a number of weeks afterwards because they were so worried about what was going to happen subsequently. And she left a little note when she did it, and she said, her note said, "I attack this work of art deliberately as a protest against the government's criminal injustice in denying women the vote, and also against the government's brutal injustice in imprisoning, forcibly feeding and drugging suffragist militants, whilst allowing Ulster militants to go free. Let all sensible men and women inquire into the cause of militancy instead of condemning the militants. This is the grave of Charles Lapworth, who was a pioneering Midlands geologist. So Charles Lapworth, one of the UK's great unsung scientific heroes.
So this was a chance find for us. We happened to be walking past, and we got interested to see illusionists, and it was actually quite well hidden, and we thought, oh, that's interesting. So we had a little look up, a dig around to find out a bit more about him. And he was actually Abraham Blitz. He was the family Blitz was a family of conjurers, illusionists, and magicians. His grandfather was the first Blitz. His actual name was Antonio van Zandt, but presumably when he changed his stage name to Blitz, his grandfather's, the family seemed to have took on the name, and I think that was partly to keep that connection. In terms of like being an entertainer, it was really important to have that tradition. So there were a lot of Blitzes, and some of them were related to Abraham Blitz, the grandfather. Sorry, Antonio Blitz, and some of them weren't. But Abraham was his grandson. He was probably the last. He was the last of the conjurer Blitzes, illusionist Blitzes. His most famous, the most famous Blitz is an American. He had an American uncle who actually pulled an egg from the Lincoln's son's ear. And he wrote a book, 50 Years of in the Magical Circle. He was really quite a famous, the most famous Blitz, if you like. But actually, he must have this Blitz, Abraham, must have had a connection with him, because he actually inherited all his magic kit from his American uncle. They obviously travelled around a lot as entertainers, so he would have gone all over the world, including America. He actually called himself Herr Blitz rather than Senior Blitz. Most of them were Senior Blitzes. I think that was to distinguish himself, because there were so many people in the family who were magicians and conjurers. And it was quite common to borrow names and also tricks. So there was a particular partner he had, Chung Lee Soo, who was well known. You know about Chung Lee Soo?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think Patrick would know that as well.
So
Chung Lee Soo, the bullets in the mouth.
Yeah, yes.
That's the guy. Yeah. So he was. They used to tour together. Chung Lee Soo actually used to have a performance in London. And there was a music hall like across the road where Chung Lee Foo was performing. Who had a very similar performance. And actually there was Chung Lee Foo challenged Chung Lee Soo to a magic off. Sadly, Chung Lee Foo didn't actually turn up, and from what I can gather, Chung Lee Foo was probably his trick in the first place. But in the press, Chung Lee Soo benefited from the fact that the other one hadn't turned up. So, actually, Chung Lee Soo tragically died. The catching the bullet trick, exactly that, which actually was it was Signor Antonio Blitz's signature trick. So quite possibly he got it from him, and he called it "Condemned to Death by the Boxers." And it was in fact the only time he spoke English on the stage. And it was his last words. It's gone wrong.
He suffered ill health all of his life, which prematurely aged him and led to his nickname Pa. So even though he wasn't that old when he died, only 56, people always called him Pa. Norton met Charles Gerard, who worked for the French Clermont Engine Company, and in 1902 Norton made his first powered motorcycle called the Energet, with a single-cylinder 143cc Clermont engine made in Birmingham. He was also Birmingham, a staunch Salvationist, and was the core treasurer at Sparkbrook Salvation Army, long since closed. When he died, he was accorded a full Salvation Army funeral, attended by the Birmingham Divisional Headquarters. In 2017, his grave was found to be in a neglected state, and after this was publicised, I didn't realise this, it was restored and a wreath was placed there in commemoration of his death, 91. So this is in 15th of April 2017, so they placed a wreath there to mark it. And Major Victor Kennedy from the Salvation Army conducted a short service, accompanied by a few members of Birmingham Citadel Salvation Army Band to mark the occasion. And this established a connection between the Salvation Army and the Norton Motorcycle Owners Club. So, unlikely connection, but an interesting one. Yeah, so that's it.
Dying abroad and not at home alongside your family was obviously a big thing for people. So the War Commission took on responsibility to make sure that people had a proper place to commemorate. And there are literally thousands of these Blomfield crosses and Luton altars. The reason why, obviously, the cross was a very Christian symbol, which people wanted to have as part of it, but it was also felt important that all faith and none had a place to. One of the, I think it's fabulous bringing the people from Pagnell School to here to have a look at the graves, because there are so many nationalities represented. And I think people assume, or the way it's taught, or perhaps, I don't know, people might assume that it's from a young age that it's British white soldiers that are going out and fighting. In this grave, especially because of the nature of the hospital, you will find every nationality. There's a lot of New Zealand and Australian in particular here.
South Africa,
there are lots of British soldiers as well, but all different regiments from all European countries, and you'll be surprised how many different nationalities you'll find there. And it's been really useful for us to research a story, like we have done with these today, about these soldiers. The records are there. It's very relatively easy to find out about the people that are written on these walls, and to find a story around where they were and how they ended up being in Birmingham. So it's been a really good research project to do with children, to get some better understanding of what World War I was like, and might have been like some of the soldiers. I feel like this, all of Lodge Hill Cemetery is about what you make it. You know, if you these are important places for people to come and remember people. But as you can see, there's so much diversity of the way that people choose to remember and use this space for, as well as for nature actually. In that area there's a meadow, starting a meadow, partly for the poppies, but also more generally for wildflower, which I think is a nice use of some of our spaces.